Okay, let's formally start our technical discussion for today. We have already seen friend functions where the concept was that you have a class, right? Class has some private data, and you have a global standalone function which is not a member of the class, and we grant access to the private data of that class to the function using the concept of friendship, right? So the key, you can say, theme that we have been discussing so far was that there was a class, right, and there was some function. So we, within the class, we had something public, which is already accessible, right? There is no problem with that, but there is something which is private, right? So you know that this access is not granted. On the other hand, access to public is okay. Okay, so if we want to grant access to this private data, what we can do, we can make this function a friend of the class. Okay, so basically now this function would be able to access private data using dot operator, just like you are doing from inside the class, right? And we also discussed that this is violating the principle of data hiding. So practically it is not very frequently used, but a very common application is once you are doing operator overloading using non-member function, right? So you make those friend functions. This is the discussion we have done already. Now today we'll be extending this discussion to classes, right? Now if you see on this side of the board, right side, right, on one hand we have a class, and the second entity is a function, right? So this function is actually a friend of the class. Now what we can do is that we have, on both the ends we have two classes, class A and class B. Okay, so class A has some data, right? It has some functions. Similarly, class B has some data and some function. Now suppose the member functions of class B, they want to access private data of class A, right? So you see the difference, that now previously a global function was made friend of a class. Now on both the sides we have classes, and we say, okay, why not make this complete class a friend of class A, right? So it means we can say we can make class B a friend of class A. Now when you do that, what will happen? All the functions, member functions of class B, now they will be able to access private data of class A using dot operator, just like it was happening in case of functions, right? The only difference now is that you are making complete class a friend of another class. Okay, so all the member functions of that class, they would be able to access the private data. Okay, so we'll do a couple of examples on this in detail to discuss further, right? And maybe I can start with a very simple example without you can say much real world interpretation, and next we'll do some concrete example. Okay, so let's make just very two simple classes, A and B, right? So suppose I make a class which is A, and it has some data in its you can say private section, we call it data, and then maybe it has a constructor or anything, right? So you can make constructor or whatever functions this class has. Now we make another class which is B. Okay, it has some data, but we are not interested in that, and it has maybe few member functions. I'll just make one function, but this is applicable to other functions as well. Okay, and we are passing it an object of class A. Similarly, there can be other functions as well, right? This is applicable to other functions, but I'm discussing it only with one function. Okay, now what we want is that we can make this class a friend of class A, right? And how do we do that? You just add the keyword friend with the class name, right? Just like we were doing previously. So you write here friend, okay? And previously you were writing here function prototype, right? In the yesterday's lecture, because we wanted a function to be a friend of this class. Now we want the complete class to be its friend. So you will write the keyword friend and name of the class. That's it. Friend B means B is the friend of this class. You can also use the keyword class here, right? But even if you just write B, that is okay. And a similar issue that we discussed yesterday, that since class B is defined after class A, so if you write B here, it will complain, your compiler will complain that B is undefined, right? So it's a good idea that we write class declaration. As we discussed yesterday, class declaration is just like function declaration, where you tell your program that there will be a class B and the definition is coming later on, right? So this is only for that purpose, the statement that you see right on the top. Okay, now this class is a friend, so all the member functions within this class, now they are able to access the private data of class A, right? So for example, if here I write a dot data, right? Now this is a legal statement. Why is it a legal statement? Because this class B, since it's a friend of class A, so it can access the private data. All the member functions of this class, they can access the private data of class A, right? So this was a very simple example, but there is something important before we do another example. You see, for example, maybe in some of the earlier classes, you have studied theorems like if A is equal to B, then it implies B equals to A, right? Something like that we used to study at school. Okay. Now let's see what is the situation here. So here we say B is friend of A, right? So can you tell me, just typing yes or no, if I ask you, is A also a friend of B? What do you think? You can just type yes or no in the, when I say B is friend of A, can I say A is also friend of B? Yes or no? Just type whatever you think, so that once I have few responses, then I. Okay, so we have a mixed distribution, few no's and few yes answers, right? So actually, the answer is no, right? The answer is no. Why is it no? You see, when we say B is a friend of A, okay, so this is B, this is A. It means B has access to private data of A, right? Which is fine because A granted that access. A decided that okay, B can access my private data. I have no problem with that. But when you say A is friend of B, then it means this second statement is saying A can access private data of B. There is something private here like int x. So A should also be able to access that, which is not true, right? Why? If we want that, then we should explicitly do that. And who will decide it? Class B will decide it, right? If you want that B is friend of A, who is taking the decision? Class A. So you write here that this B is my friend. A is taking this decision. If you want that A should also be a friend of B, this is not automatic, right? This will not happen. So what you will need to do, you will have to explicitly do it by writing something like this. Only then this will be true, right? So in summary, we can say that friendship is not symmetric, right? This relationship which I told you, if A equals to B, B equals to A, this is symmetric, right? But in case of friendship between classes, it is not symmetric. If we say B is friend of A, it does not mean that A is also friend of B. If you want to make it, you will have to do it, right? And again, as I stressed yesterday, that who takes the decision, um, I told you a statement which you should keep in mind, that friendship is granted, it cannot be taken, right? And who grants? The class grants. So A is taking the decision that B is my friend, right? Because the person who is writing class A, he will have to decide that if B is okay, I can make it friend, then the person who is writing class A, he will simply write a statement friend B within the class, right? So this is something that we should keep in mind. Okay, now let's do another example which will further clear your confusion, or which further elaborate this concept. You see, the concept of this friend classes is commonly used when we are doing composition. And you must have realized it because you recently attempted assignment number 2 in which you were doing composition, flight class, date, time, and so on, right? I'm just telling you a common possibility where friend classes can be used. Okay, I'm not saying that it must be used, but normally friend classes are used with composition because it will simplify your program. You see, recently you were writing a function to delay a flight. Okay, since you did it recently, so that's why I'm giving this example. Okay, so it was something like this which you had to do. Okay, many of your batchmates actually asked me, so I explained to them how to do that. Okay, so you see, within the flight class, what do you have? You have a date. We are not interested in date. You have a time. Okay, and let's suppose that time, we are only talking about time of departure. Okay, so if I have to delay time of departure, so you see here, I first need to know what is the current time. And for that, what were we doing? We were saying, okay, integer, say minute is time of departure dot get minute, right? Similarly, if you want to know what is the current hour, then you had to say time of departure dot get hour. Okay, now you see what was the problem here. Actually, this is not a problem, but since the data of time class is private, okay, so I cannot directly write something like time of departure dot minute, because I am outside the class. This is another class. This function is in flight class. Okay, so I cannot write directly something like this. This is the reason that if I have to access the hour and minute, I need to call the get functions. Okay, so now you see, now you already know what is composition. You know the basic idea of friend classes. What we can do is, if I make this time class, sorry, if I make this flight class a friend of time, right, means flight is a friend of time. So what will happen? Flight class will be allowed to access private data of time class. So it means that now this will become a legal statement, right? Similarly, if the flight class wants to access hour, minute, second, everything, so since R is also private, so this will also become a legal statement. So now you see that when we are doing composition, normally the container class, which is flight, there can be a situation that it needs to access the private data of the contained class, which is time in this case. And for that, we can make use of get functions, set functions, right? That is perfectly fine. There's no problem with that. But we can further make our life easier by making the flight or the container a friend of the contained class, which is time in this case. So the advantage would be that if I am writing a function in the flight class and I need private data of date or time or any other thing, then I can just write dot and I can access it. So now you see the link between the two, that how friend classes can be useful in composition. Okay, so let's do an example of this, right? Maybe some different example. So let me just think of some example which we can do. Yeah. Okay. We some time back we did an example of rectangle class, if you remember. Okay. Without, of course, with composition, but at that time we had not seen friend classes. Okay. So I told you that you can model a rectangle with 2 points. One point is top left. Okay. Say this point is 2 and this is 4. So this point is 4. And similarly, you can specify bottom right. Okay, this example we have already done in composition, but now we are trying to revisit this by including the concept of friend classes. Okay, and suppose this is what should I say, 8, and this is, let's say, okay, so this point is 8 1. Okay, now if I implement it, what I will do, I already have a point class. So when I will implement the rectangle class, I can use composition and I can say rectangle has 2 points. One point is top left and the other point is bottom right. Okay, we did something like that. And then as far as I remember, we had made a function to calculate the area of this rectangle. Okay, now you see, when you compute area, you need the height, which is this thing, and the width of the rectangle, which is this. And how do we calculate the width and height? For example, in this case, I will do for width is actually 8 minus 2. And what is actually 8? 8 is x component of this point, right? So 8 is actually bottom right dot x. But when I will write in this function, I cannot write bottom right dot x. Why? Because x is a private data member of point class. So what we were doing previously, we were doing this thing. But now you see, if I can make this class rectangle a friend of the point class, so rectangle class will be allowed to access the private data of point class. So I will be able to directly write bottom right dot x dot y, right? So it will simplify my program. Okay, so since we already have the point class, so let me quickly add the rectangle class and make it a friend of the point class, and rewrite the area function where we can directly access the private data of point class. Okay, so point class is already there. What I'll do, I'll quickly make a rectangle class here. Okay, with minimum functionality. So I make a class rectangle. Okay, and what do we have as data? We have 2 points, point top left and point bottom right. Okay, so now we have 2 points. We can just make a constructor, maybe rectangle. It has a point top left and a point bottom right. Okay, and here I can write top left gets this value. Okay, I'm just using the other syntax for constructor, so that you remember that this is also something that we had seen. Okay, so this is the constructor, and now what we can do, we have to make the area function in this class. Okay, so I'll write int area. Okay, so for area I need to compute the width and height. So width is, what is width? Width is bottom right dot x, which was 8 in our example, minus top left dot x, which was 2 in our example, right? So you see presently it is giving me error. You can see the why it is giving me error, because x is inaccessible. X is a private data member of point class, and I am trying to access it outside the class because this function is in another class. Okay, this is not in the point class. Integer height is basically top left dot y minus bottom right, sorry, right dot y. Okay, this will again give error because y is also not accessible, and then we say return width into height. Okay, now in order to make rectangle a friend of point class, what we need to do, okay, we just need to add here friend rectangle. Okay, and I'll also add the class declaration that there is a class rectangle which is coming later on in the program. Okay, so now you see the error is gone. There is no error now. Okay, so this function which is in the rectangle class is allowed to access the private data of the point class, because this rectangle class is actually a friend of the point class. Okay, and this is true for other functions as well. For example, if I make a function perimeter, okay, then since the class is friend, so all the functions of this class, now they can access, you can say, the private data of class, right? This is a legal statement. Similarly, you can compute width and height. You can add all of the 4 values together, 4 sides, you will get parameter. Okay, so when you are making this class a friend, all the member functions can actually access the private data of the point class. Okay, so let me just show you this example on the slides in detail. Okay, so that you can correlate with whatever we have seen. So let me just okay, so maybe this is the example that we just made, right? This is the point class. We make rectangle a friend of this class, the last statement that you see. Okay, and as I told you, this statement you can write anywhere in the private or public, it does not matter. Why it does not matter? Because it is actually not a member. When you say public and private, they are applicable to the members of the class. When we are telling that something is friend, then we are just telling it, okay, it does not become a member. That's why you can write it in private or public, it will not make any difference, right? So this is basically the area function which we just made, okay. And now we the highlighted text is actually trying to access private data of point class, which is legal now because we made this class a friend of the point class, okay. Now a very similar example, this time with a different example, that rather than rectangle, suppose we have a triangle class. So triangle is actually 3 points, and the area of triangle is something like this: 1 by 2 x1 y2 minus y3 and so on, right? So in other words, when you will implement it, you will have a point class, and in the triangle class you will have 3 objects of point class. And in order to calculate the area, you will need the x and y coordinates of point, which are private. So we can again use the concept of friendship to actually and directly access the data, right? So we have this point class, and then the last statement that you see, we say that triangle is actually a friend of this, you can say, point class, okay. So this is the key statement which is doing this. And then you have the triangle class, in which you take 3 points, which are the 3 corners of a triangle. And then when you make the area function, now instead of writing p1 dot get x and then get y, and similarly p2 dot p3 dot and so on, right? So you see we can directly access all the data members because we made it a friend class, right? So one more note before we conclude this topic, that you see we have done this example with maybe 2 classes. Now suppose we have 3 classes, a, b and c, okay. And we say, okay, B is a friend of A, okay, and C is a friend of B, right? We're getting B is a friend of A and C is a friend of B. So just like you did previously, can you give me a yes or no answer? Can I say C is also a friend of A? What do you think? Yes or no? You can just quickly type so that then we discuss. B is a friend of A and C is a friend of B. Can I say C is also a friend of A? Yes or no? Okay, again, we have more no than yes, okay. So actually it is no, right? Why is it no? It makes sense, right? Okay, let's see, for example, if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then we can say A is greater than C. Here it holds, right? And this relationship is called transitive relationship, okay? We know if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then I can say A is greater than C. Here it's okay. But in this case, this is not okay. Why? Because we have discussed many times that when you say B is friend of A, so B can access the data of A, right? Because A has granted it access. When you say C is friend of B, so C can access the data of class B because class B granted access to C. But class A did not grant access to C. Okay, so just because C is a friend of B, it is not legal to say that C can access private data of A as well, right? So this was just, you can say, a small comment that I wanted to share with you. So now we can summarize our discussion on friend functions and friend classes, right? Just a quick summary of all we have seen so that if something comes to your mind, we can discuss that, right? So we say that friend functions are actually non-member functions. They are global standalone functions, but they are allowed access to the private data of class in some special cases, right? As I told you that when you are telling that this function is a friend of a class, you can place that information anywhere in the class, right? It does not matter it's private or public because it can be anywhere because anyhow it is not a member of the class, okay. So as we said, it violates the data hiding principle, so it should not be very commonly used, right? The last two bullets are very important. Friendship is granted, not taken, right? Means the class will decide which functions and which other classes can be friend, right? And the last point is, which we discussed a little while back, that friendship is neither symmetric nor transitive. What is symmetric? Symmetric was the example that we said if A is friend of B, is B is friend of A. So you said no, right? So it is not symmetric. What is transitive? If A is friend of B and B is friend of C, then C is friend of A. So this is transitive, right? So in case of some operators, this holds. But when we are talking about the concept of friend classes, then they are neither symmetric nor transitive, right? So with that, we conclude our discussion on friend functions and friend classes. Before we see something else, if you have any questions, we can discuss those. Thank you.